We should be good to go.
Okay.
I will do a roll call. Viviano, here. Okay.
Here.
Busco,
Aye.
Lash, Riccuti,
Here.
Robinson, Bradenberg,
Here?
and Wyatt. We do have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay. And I'm assuming everybody has had a chance to read the May minutes. Are there any additions?
Motion to approve.
I'm sorry?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I'll do a roll call vote. Viviano, aye. Forte,
Aye.
Busco,
Aye.
Riccuti,
Aye.
and Bradenberg.
Aye.
The motion to approve the minutes passes.
Okey doke. We continue on with our public education strategies, our first order of old business. Couple of things. And I can't even read my, oh, okay. So Casey is not able to be with us today, family emergency. But she did check with the Art Commission on social media. And what they do is when they need something to go out to the large audience, they work through the communications department. So I suggest that that's probably the practice we would take. Any thoughts? Okay. Another thing that came up, and I don't know if this has been resolved, is the idea that when people send us an email, it just kind of goes into the ozone and nobody ever hears anything. And I was wondering if there can be or is now like an automatic reply. Thank you for contacting the Tree Commission. Basically, we've received your email and we'll give it due consideration, something like that. Sarah, do you know anything about that?
Do not, I don't have access to that email address to set up anything like that.
Okay.
I could set it up and then maybe run it by John Skaken to approve it, and then set it up once it's approved.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, good. Because I think people would like to know that they haven't been completely ignored, even if that's eventually what happens. Not really. Okay, and the videos. Did everybody get a chance to look at the videos that Casey sent us a couple of weeks ago on the tree plantings? I think that is something that we should post to our website. That's at least something people can get to act on. Thoughts on that? Good idea. Good idea.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think that they're all solid videos as far as showing, just general, education on tree planting or maintenance or just other things that, our, city arborists and, other professionals are doing, and things that, if you wanted, like I'm saying you as in this, the sense of, the citizen wanted to either get more involved or do backyard gardening or, frankly, learn more about this stuff and, see about getting a tree planted or just getting engaged. I think those are all solid things. So I think that the three videos that are there were great. And if this is a thing that becomes a trend in the future of other similar types of videos, I think it would also be great as well. So I'm all for it. I'm all for posting these things. Whether that is, a link that would be on the city's website, whether that'll be a thing that will be on the socials, however that would look, I think that those are fine.
Yeah, I think it would probably, the best place for it to be would be on our website so that they can actually click on something. Now, I'm assuming that we have to run that through communications, that they're the ones who deal with our website. Is that correct, Sarah?
That is my understanding too.
Okay, okay,
I can forward that on if you'd like.
great, great. Thank you. Okay,
May I piggyback on that?
pardon?
May I piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking too, perhaps what we may want to do is develop a curriculum or think about that. Especially in these days, you can prepare in advance what can go out on social media and, say, okay, well, I don't know, in August, we like for this to go out on these 2 dates or something. And then September, these 2 or 3 dates, we'd like this to go out, and maybe if we develop like a game plan in terms of what needs to go out and have it prepared for the folks over there in the public relations department, we could get that up and running.
Okay.
Easy. Yeah. Just a
And
thought.
I think maybe Matt, that's something, if you can think of things that it would be good for people to know. Is that-
Absolutely. So I've been looking at some of the other cities' websites, and I can come up with a list of things that I feel like we should have on our tree commission webpage. We've got a lot of material already, like the stuff you're talking about.
Mhm.
A lot of these videos, a lot of these flyers, like the things that Casey sent out.
Okay,
It'd be awesome to get all that stuff on there.
okay. So you could coordinate that with Sarah, and Sarah could coordinate. Is it the service director's office that handles that, or is that comms, communications?
My understanding is it would all go through the Department of Communications.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good, good, good. Making progress on that. I would love for that not to be a perpetual item on our old business list, but you never know. Next item on the agenda is information about objections, and I think Matt and John were going to work on that, or John was going to work on that.
Yeah, so I think what we were tasked with doing pursuant to this matter was modifying or talking about planning, strategizing appropriate modifications to the Code of Ordinances to ensure that those types of objections were authorized for this commission to hear, because currently under the controlling ordinance, they are not. So I have been working with and connected with Jeff this morning and Matt about the code amendments. So we are working through that. They're almost ready, and then they will go through council when the time is right. And I'll defer to Jeff on the timing of that, but we have the law and the amendments ready to go for that.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Will we get to see those first, or will that just go straight to council?
Jeff, do you want to speak?
No, go ahead, John.
Okay. I don't feel comfortable sharing them publicly prior to having them get approved by the cabinet. That's kind of our procedure here. We want to make sure that they're accepted by the cabinet, by the administration, and then we send them over to council. Since I'm working on this amendment with Jeff, obviously Jeff will be working with this and seeing it earlier. I can inquire about sharing that earlier. Jeff, do you have any, like with your With your experience, you have any thing to add to that?
I just said it's kind of like a housekeeping thing, I think, more than anything else. I don't see substantial changes within what we've been talking about. There really isn't. Yeah, it's pretty basic and straightforward, I think, uh, in terms of what's being proposed. Um, but yeah, in terms of timing, and I don't know, I guess Matt, what would be our timing in terms of making sure, people have an opportunity? The spring planning probably is almost completed or in the
This
midst of.
the spring planting, the last tree was planted last week.
So I thought, yeah,
And that was just kind of wrapping up loose ends and putting in some of the last trees in parks. The
okay,
last tree on a tree lawn, I think, was 3 weeks ago now. So we've been pretty much wrapped up with spring planting. So right now is when I am coming up with all the planning portion of things. Like I'm making the map of where all these trees are going to go and picking out the species.
yeah,
And next week, I'm going to start tagging trees at nurseries.
okay,
Um, but as of next week, we can start notifying citizens.
okay,
We could. I kind of want to get this figured out before I start notifying citizens because I think there's going to need to be some changes to the letter that I send out. Not a lot,
yes,
but a little bit.
uh-huh,
Um,
huh.
so it is
John,
now. Now is the time.
okay, John,
Thank
what are your thoughts on that, John? In terms of, like I said, yeah, to get the approvals, all the checkoffs we need. Is there anything we should do?
I think it's ready to go. I will just need Jeff from you a request and from you
Okay.
and or Sarah a UCR triggering this process, and I'll start it on my end, and then we'll get it to council and move from there.
John, can we also and urge and within an email to our commissioners, fellow commissioners here, a draft and just say this is a proposed draft at this time. Do not respond to this in bold letters, just so that the commissioners have a heads up on what's happening. Is that okay? I mean, after we get the checkoffs, of course.
Yeah, after we get the checkoffs, I want to wait until getting approval from the
Absolutely.
administration on
Yep.
the final language. But after that, they usually give the approval of that on Thursday mornings before the next council meeting, which is on a Monday night. So after I get that approval on a Thursday, when this goes forward, I'll send it to you all and you can look at the draft.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, John.
Perfect.
And
Yeah,
Sarah,
thank you, everyone.
Sarah can, yeah, good job. Good work on this, John. Appreciate all your effort. And Matt, Sarah, we could maybe request that today if that's okay with you and move from there.
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you. Is that okay, Madam President?
Yep.
Cool.
All righty. Next item is the rules of procedure. John?
Right. Yeah. So rules of procedure, I also discussed this with Jeff earlier. I have those drafted. I have like a skeleton form of them. I want to wait to present them to the group and to have you all review them and then eventually vote on them until we have the two ordinances that we're contemplating passed and have them be good law. I want to make sure that the rules of procedure use the approved language in the code. And we need to have that language settled, before we can include it in the rules of procedure. So it's on the way, it's drafted. There are just going to be some potential modifications, and we need to pass those ordinances first, but they're on the way.
Okay. And so I'm assuming then that the master tree planting plan is kind of like the icing on the cake with all this. We get the ordinances passed and then make sure that the master tree planting plan is included in the ordinance. Is that the way that works?
Sarah, the way that I understand it is that, and this is how I've been trying to communicate from the beginning, is that there are two ordinances. There's the code amendment that we discussed, that was item 1, subsection B of this agenda, and then the code of ordinances requires that the council adopt the master tree planting plan. I have not found any ordinance in our history formally adopting that. So the council would need to adopt that. We call that document the master tree planting plan, but until it's formally adopted, it's not really the master tree planting plan. It's kind of confusing how that language works around that. But my position and understanding and recommendation for you all is that we pass those two ordinances, right? That code amendment and adoption of the master tree planting plan. Those would be separate ordinances.
Okay.
And then we use the language from there to develop the rules of procedure.
Okay,
So that's how all these work together.
okay. So just had the order a little bit out of whack. So I'm just assuming everybody's good with all of this. I mean, it will be nice to get it done so we can actually do our job.
To Jeff's earlier point, too, most of all of this is just housekeeping, right? It's formalizing our duties. It's formally adopting this document that has a major impact on what we do and how we do it. And then it's developing rules to ensure that we're doing things regularly, appropriately, and within the confines of the law.
Okay. Okay. Well, does anybody have anything else under old business? I think that's pretty well it.
John, did you want to discuss the $15 fee?
$15 fee?
Yeah, we can do that. Matt and I had discussed earlier this morning about in the amendments to the ordinance. So I guess we're moving back to section 1, subsection B of the agenda.
I can talk to you about this outside of the meeting if you'd like. I can let you know what I found out.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Yep.
do that. All right, thanks.
All right. So moving on to new business, Dr. Jeffrey Donovan is our visitor. He was with the Division of Forestry. Is that right?
I was with the research branch of the Forest Service for 23 years.
Okay. And then, like so many thousands of others, found himself without a job. So he has a business that works in the urban with tree canopy, and he would like to take a few minutes to talk to us about what he does. So Jeff, if you'd like to go
Let
ahead.
me see if I can hang on a second. I just need to share the screen with you. I never get this exactly in the right order. Let's see. So let me know when you can see the screen. Let's just go. Can you see that?
Yeah, we
Yep.
can see.
Great. So I'm just going to talk to you briefly today about a couple of studies I've done looking at the relationship between trees and public health. And in doing so, I have a very specific reason for talking to you about this research. I'm going to try and convince you that trees are a matter of life and death. I don't mean this in some sort of overwrought metaphoric sense. I mean it quite literally. So that's my goal. And I may at the end check with a show of hands to see if I've managed to convince you that trees are indeed a matter of life and death. But before I talk about specific results, I'm going to talk about some of the methodological problems you run into when you're doing trees, studies on trees and health. And I'm sure you're familiar with this problem, which is the nice tree, nice neighborhood effect. In urban areas, neighborhoods with more trees are going to be wealthier, whiter, and better educated. And we absolutely know that income, race, and education, they're big drivers of public health outcomes. So when you see that people are healthier in greener neighborhoods, and they certainly are, there's no question about that, how do you know how much of this improved health is because of trees and how much of it is because of income, race, and education? How do you divide up those benefits? And the uncomfortable answer is you're never completely sure how much is down to the trees and how much is demography. And there are statistical techniques you can use to try and sideline the effects of demography, but they're definitely not foolproof. So there's another approach you can take, and rather than looking across a city at one point in time and trying to disentangle this relationship between trees, health, and demographics, you can instead look to see what happens when tree canopy changes over time. So this approach has some advantages because changes in tree cover over time, they need not be correlated with demographic drivers of health, like race or education income. But for this approach to work, you'd need two conditions to hold. First, you'd need major changes in tree cover in a relatively short amount of time. Otherwise, there's going to be no measurable impact on health. You won't be able to see anything. And second, those changes in tree cover would need to be uncorrelated with demographic drivers of health. And the approach I'm describing here is what's called a natural experiment, and it provides stronger evidence of a causal relationship, in this case, between trees and health. So I'm just going to talk about the results of two natural experiments. One looks at what happens when you lose a lot of trees in a short amount of time, and the other looks at what happens to human health when you plant a large number of trees in a relatively short amount of time. So let's begin with tree loss. What could kill a large amount of trees in a short amount of time? Given that you're in Ohio, I'm pretty sure you're going to get the answer to this question right. Here's this handsome little chap here, the emerald ash borer, that could certainly kill plenty of trees in a short amount of time. So it satisfies that first condition. You're going to get rid of a lot of trees. What about the second condition? Is tree loss from EAB associated with other changes in, say, race or education or income? To look at that, let's look at this little animation. It shows the spread of EAB from Detroit in 2002 all the way out, unfortunately, to right by me in Oregon in 2022. And when you look at it, can you imagine something like race or education or income changing in this fashion? The answer is no. Demographics don't really change this way. And you don't just have to eyeball this. I've looked at the statistics, and this change in tree cover from EAB is not related to anything like education or income or race. So what that tells you is if this change in tree cover is correlated with with changes in human health, then that's not likely to be caused by other changes in race or education or income. So why is that? Well, because EAB is an egalitarian little beast. It kills trees in poor neighborhoods. It kills trees in rich neighborhoods. It kills trees in white neighborhoods. It kills trees in neighborhoods of color. It just doesn't care. So our two conditions are met here. We're going to see a major change in tree canopy. It's not going to be related to other drivers of health. Let's see what happens. And in this map here, the black squares are counties. So in this case, I looked at county level mortality from 1990 to 2007. And I looked at two causes of death. I looked at cardiovascular and then lower respiratory mortality. Why that? Well, first they matter. They're the first and third biggest killers in the US. So we're not looking at toenail fungus or something. These are diseases that really matter. And the other is, and this is really important, there are plausible mechanisms linking trees to these two causes of death. So for example, trees can absorb air pollution, and exposure to air pollution is a risk factor for both cardiovascular and lower respiratory disease. In addition, exposure to trees can reduce stress, and stress is absolutely a risk factor for both of these diseases. So we looked at county level from mortality from 1990 up to 2002, long running period, no bug. You add the bug, or the bug added itself in 2002, and you see what happens. And we found that counties infested with EAB had higher rates of cardiovascular and lower respiratory mortality. What was interesting, as an infestation progressed, that is, as more trees died, more people died. So you saw this dose-response relationship between tree death and human death. We also saw a bigger impact in wealthier counties. Why would that be, do we think? Well, because those wealthier counties are likely to have more trees. Those will create greater benefits. So if you take them away, you're going to see bigger negative health impacts. And that's what we found. And in this case, across 6 years and 15 states, we saw an additional 15,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease and an additional 6,000 from lower respiratory. So that's an additional 21,000 deaths, which are attributable to changes in tree canopy from EAB. So not non-trivial numbers here. So that's the natural experiment that looked at what happens when you lose trees. But what happens when you add trees? You would think the opposite. But the problem there is that you would need years or really decades of tree planting data to do this sort of work. I didn't know where I could get it. And then just a few years ago, I happened to be talking to a colleague of mine who works in a Portland-based nonprofit called Friends of Trees. And we're just talking about something unrelated. And in passing, she mentioned that Friends of Trees had 30 years of tree planting data. So I couldn't believe this. They had 30 years where they planted 50,000 trees. So the address, the date where they planted all these trees. And even better here is that the pattern of tree planting was not correlated with his race or education or income. The way they'd gone about this planting, they were trying to actually focus on some on underserved communities, and the overall effect of this tree planting, it was not correlated with race, education, or income. So now we see a big change in tree canopy, addition of tree canopy, not related to demography. Let's see what happens here. So I had to get access to health data, went to Oregon Health Authority, and they gave me access to census tract level mortality data. For those of you who don't know, census tract is just a geographic unit used by the US Census. In Portland, which is a city of 600,000, there's about 140. So really, it's about the size of a named neighborhood. You can think of this, in this study, we looked at neighborhood level mortality. And we had two measures of tree planting. One, we just looked at how many trees were planted in the last 15 years in each neighborhood. So just total tree planting. And the second, we looked at the relationship between trees that had been planted 1 to 5 years ago, just young trees, 6 to 10, and then 11 to 15. Well, why would we do that? Because we would think in advance that as trees get bigger and older, they would have a bigger impact on health, right? So one obvious example is as trees get older, they can absorb more air pollution, for example. They have more leaves. So we want to see if we saw that. So let's just jump straight to the results here. We really found that 5 things were associated with, and in this case, we looked at non-accidental mortality. So it's neighborhood level, non-accidental mortality. Why non-accidental? Because there's no plausible reason that tree planting is going to affect accidental death. There's no mechanisms at play there. So we just looked at non-accidental mortality. First thing we found is that neighborhoods which are wealthier, they had significantly lower rates of mortality. You see this all the time, this inverse relationship between income and mortality. Next, in neighborhoods where people were older, those higher rates of mortality, again, hardly surprising. You see this all the time. Neighborhoods with higher rates of education had lower rates of mortality, again, not surprising. In the case of race, it was not significant. It was just mildly surprising, but we already have race and education in the model there, so that may explain it. And also Portland is just a very white city, so there's just actually not that much variation. So what about trees? Well, that's what we care about. We found that neighborhoods with more tree planting in the last 15 years had significantly lower rates of non-accidental mortality. Okay, that's great, but sometimes you get cases where you have significant relationships, but the magnitude isn't big enough. So how big was this effect? Is it big enough to care about? So what we found is that on average, Friends of Trees planted 1,638 trees a year. And we found that those number of trees a year were associated with 15.6 fewer deaths, which is enough to care about here. Another way to look at this is roughly 1 death was averted for every 100 trees planted, which I think is actually a pretty startling result. So now let's have a quick look and see what happens as these trees get older, as they grow. So in this, we did a very simple thing. We said, let's take that average annual number of trees, 1,638, and then let's wait 1 to 5 years after planting and see how many deaths are averted. So they've been 1 to 5 years after planting. It's associated with 11.6 fewer deaths across the city. Now let's wait for those trees to grow 5 more years still. Now they're associated with 19.7 fewer deaths. And then we allow those trees to grow even further, now 23.1 fewer deaths. So as you can see, as trees get older and bigger, then they avert more deaths. And so what's important to remember there is that tells you not only is planting trees important, but retaining mature canopy is at least, if not more important. So in this case, I also wanted to compare the results to the EAB study. In the EAB study, we looked at cardiovascular and lower respiratory mortality. So we also did that in this study, and we found that neighborhoods where they planted more trees, there were significantly lower rates of cardiovascular mortality, highly significant. With lower respiratory mortality, it was a little different. That was marginal. So not quite as strong there. But really, the relationship between cardiovascular disease, this is quite remarkable. So you have two studies conducted 9 years apart. One where you lost trees, cardiovascular disease went up. One where you added trees, cardiovascular disease went down. And these are very different studies conducted 9 years apart, different study areas, different measures of tree loss or gain, different statistical models. And also in both cases, you found a dose-response relationship. In the emerald ash borer, you found that losing more trees was associated with higher cardiovascular mortality. So as more trees died, more people died. And in this study, we found that as trees aged and grew, then they were associated with bigger decreases in mortality. So a dose-response relationship in both cases. So it's quite remarkable seeing studies which are that consistent. You just don't see it very often. So in taken together, they really strengthen the burden of proof that trees can reduce overall mortality, in particular cardiovascular mortality. Second here. So what's the take-home message from all this? So hopefully, and you can tell me if I've done this, I've convinced you that trees can literally be a matter of life and death. I personally think we should be treating trees as an essential part of our public health infrastructure, no different than hospitals or ambulances. And sometimes I hear people say that trees make a city more livable, and I certainly don't disagree, but I think this really sells trees short. I think what trees do is it makes a city survivable, because we're just not designed to live in cities. This is how we've evolved. And trees are one way that allow us to deal with the stresses of city living. And that is all I have for you. There's my contact information if you want to talk to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. The first would be, yes, this is the world's cutest dog. This is Georgie, my puggle. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Part of it is I think we're all on board even before you got here, but this, it's the difference between livable and survivable, I think makes a difference. Folks, other questions?
I wish Jeff could come to the Ward 8 meeting tomorrow.
Well, I'm happy to come along to any meetings virtually. I'd be, I spent the first 25 years of my career doing this research, and what I hope to do is spend the next few years is really getting it out there, and in private practice, really trying to see that research applied and making a difference. So if you do want me to come along to meetings, I'm happy to do that.
I think we'd have to set something up with the council person for a ward, but that'd be awesome in the future.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback what Matt just noted, not just about tomorrow's council meeting, but what I was really going to ask was, are you comfortable with us citing some of your findings if we're talking about some of these things with the community in future events, or also inviting you along to talk about these things as well? Because I think this is really important to keep in mind and think about from a health perspective, as you noted, rather than just a general quality of life or beautification perspective. It's a thing where it offers physical health benefits, mental health benefits, and there are tangible things. And it's difficult to relay that sometimes without necessarily having some of the data right there.
I would be delighted if you ever used anything of mine. I'd be happy to come along. I have a website for my business, and we put together 5 different fact sheets on the different types of benefits of trees. And in the chat, I've just sent you the link to the fact sheet on health. By all means, that summarizes a lot of that research. I just talked about a couple of studies there, but there's a whole, as you know, a whole range of health benefits. So please use those. I'd be delighted. If you need copies of the studies, let me know. Happy to send them. And I would always be happy to chat, to make presentations to people. Just let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's all that I had.
Oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate the interest.
Other thoughts? I mean, you always know it, but it's really nice to see it in black and white, and you can say, look, it's not just we really like trees and we think they're good for us.
Yeah, I always say trees are nice is not a very useful thing from a policy perspective, because you want to know how nice, under what circumstances, to whom, and that's where the details matter.
Okay, great. Other thoughts, folks? Okay, thank you very much.
Not at all. Thanks for your time, and let me know if I can ever be of any help.
Okay, great.
Cheerio.
Have a good rest of your afternoon.
I definitely should.
Okay, that is that was the sum total of new business. Does anybody have anything and Marie said there was no one who wanted to speak to the tree commission. So does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Well, okay. Then short meeting. 2:08 and 2:09, I will declare this meeting of the Tree Commission adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
day.
Thanks, everyone.